So for you, when it comes down to the breeding industry, what are some things that you are tired of seeing?
Yeah, I'm tired of seeing unhealthy dogs. I am tired of seeing people fail in the sense of business. They can't sell their puppies. I'm tired of seeing dogs in shelters, and I want to do something about that. And yeah, I mean, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm working with you, is to just try and make the world a better place, try and make dogs better, healthier, so our best friends can live a little bit longer, you know?
100%. And right now, what do you feel like is stopping breeders from accomplishing better breeding, but more importantly, that vision that they initially start with? What's in the way?
Yeah, I think their pride's in the way a lot of times. Everybody thinks they know everything. And, I mean, I have to humble myself every day. But, yeah, I just see a lot of people thinking that they can do this on their own and they've got everything under control. And some people do okay, but yeah, I just find a lot of people really need just more education when it comes to breeding. You know, my specialty is small. It is a very small specialty. So there's not even many specialists out there that have gone through residency and just years and years of education about this stuff. And then, you know, we've got breeders who are saying, oh yeah, I just started this 6 months ago, but I know everything. I'm just like, that's impressive because it took me much longer, but, you know, more power to you.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so, I mean, look, I think a lot of people's pride can get in their way. But ultimately, like, yeah, I think information, like, reproductive physiology is tough. It's tough for me plenty of days. And so to understand that stuff, and then also health and genetics, we're learning so much more every day, every year. It's growing so quickly that I really feel like we can use that so much more. But people are just saying, no, I got this. Look, because look, for hundreds of years, we just threw two dogs together and it worked out. But a lot of times yeah, it's tough to kind of take information about their health and genetics. And now that we have so much more information, we have so much more to learn because of that. You know, I feel like the more that you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And so that's certainly been my experience being a specialist, is there's so much more I don't know than I thought I did, you know.
I think that that's the most interesting thing, that what you just said, that so many breeders feel like they have it all figured out.
Yeah.
I believe there's two reasons for that. I believe the first reason is because of the fact that they have to have this sense of pride, or, you know, put this facade up. If I don't know something, then it's going to, you know, decrease the value of my stock.
Yeah.
If I show that I am vulnerable and I don't know enough, then I'm not going to be as valuable.
Yeah, that's what people think, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Or the other thing is, there's not really a ton of great places to go for information. So that's the other thing, is they may be humble, but they're like, where do I start, doc? You know, how do I find this information? And most vets out there, they're like, oh, you're a breeder? I couldn't care for you.
Yeah.
You know, sorry, get out of my clinic. Oh, a dog has testicles? Those are tumors. Get out of my clinic, you know? So it's there's not a lot of places to go, at least that you want to be able to trust. Vets are considered one of the most trustable professions, and when you walk in and immediately get rejected, that's tough. And you're just like, okay, where do I go? I guess I'll go back to my breeder. But they necessarily were self-taught, and so they may not have the most accurate information, or may not be able to guide you best for your dog's health. And so that could be a bigger issue as well, is not only are people can be prideful, but also it's tough to find good information, because I hear old wives' tales every single day, and I hear some that have been permeated for 40 years in the industry. I'm just like, there is literally zero data on that, you know? So I'm glad it's been working for you, but I just want you to know, nothing supports that in the literature or in studies, which is okay. It doesn't mean it's not true. It's just, I always want to be able to stand on a firm foundation, and I want my clients to be able to do that too. That way they know that this has been repeated and shown to be effective to the best of our knowledge, right?
Yeah, you know, one of the most exciting things for me is the fact that we're going to be continuously growing this database of information and experiences over time that continuously present themselves, so that way we can actually have a basis to go off of, because Facebook isn't doing that for us, or Instagram isn't doing that for us as breeders. That it's the first time that we can actually come together and be able to learn in a supportive way. The second reason I was going to get at is, of course, there's the facade that people have to put out, they're prideful. But the second thing is, it's kind of like, just like how genetics are passed on, that mindset is passed on from breeder to breeder. And so you see that with breeders who've been around for 10, 15, 20 years. It's kind of like, you buy a dog from me. If you need anything, Dave, come back to me. You know what I'm saying? The vets aren't, you know, it or whatever, just because of their experience. But this is the reason we see countless breeders making very, very expensive mistakes.
So you're saying bad mindset is hereditary?
It is hereditary, exactly. No, exactly. Bad mindset is hereditary. As funny as it sounds.
From breeder to breeder.
Breeders breed bad mindsets. That's crazy.
You may breed decent dogs, but you breed bad mindsets.
Bro, you know what's so interesting is this, right? So what I see today's age is that, so I think I was talking to you about this earlier, was that it's that thing of perfect competition where you see in the breeding economy, people are in a position where they have commoditized businesses, so they're extremely competitive and they don't really have ways to differentiate themselves. And due to that fact, they find themselves in a position where, because they don't know how to be different in the marketplace, it's the gatekeeping, and then it's also cutting cost. And what does cutting cost mean? That means I have to act like I know everything because I'm really trying to keep my pockets. You know, I'm really trying to keep my money where it should be. But at the end of the day, I mean, I would love to hear your take on it. How do you feel that impacts programs, people that try to, you know, kind of get around the expenses that come with this lifestyle and stuff of that sort?
Sure. So, I mean, just from a business aspect, like people who get into breeding and try and make a quick buck, ultimately are usually the first to fail as well or experience that. And sure, you can cut some corners, but it's going to come for you, you know, eventually, usually pretty quickly. But what I often find is, you know, it doesn't make sense from a business aspect too, because what often happens is when you cut corners or you try and cut costs, right? So let's use a Frenchie, for example, just since they typically need a C, or I'd say they always need a C-section. In those cases, often you're not going to do progesterone timing for your breeding, right? And therefore, you're not really going to have a super accurate due date. So you end up costing more on the back end to try and figure out when she's due, or she goes into labor, and you end up having to do an emergency C-section, which costs 2 or 3 times the price of a planned one. And then, more than likely, you probably have lost a puppy or two as well. One of them could be deformed as well, or, you know, and so you're talking about losing maybe a quarter or 10% of your stock as far as from a business aspect of what you were hoping to sell for more money. One, you also probably didn't do health testing, so you have no idea if these dogs are going to be healthy. So say somebody tries to buy them for breeding rights and they actually want to investigate and be like, hey, can you do genetic testing or DNA testing or maybe some active health testing like OFA testing, and it turns out to be poor results or fair or, you know, not quite passing. It's one of these where then you're going to lose loyalty, you're going to lose buyers, you're going to lose people who potentially want to use these dogs as genetic stock, and it's just a very quick path to failure when cutting costs. And these are just small little examples that I see all the time where, oh, I bought a progesterone machine at my house. Guess what? It's 4 to 5 days off the due date. That happens so often where I have to beg my clients. I'm just like, please just give me 1 or 2 progesterone tests with my machine or at any vet's machine. It's just these at-home stuff. People really try and cut costs. And they also don't realize some of the dangers with that too. And the other thing I'll caution as well is a lot of states are starting to crack down on legality of those things because in theory, or not in theory, in practicality, it's performing medical analysis or medical diagnoses on your dogs. And so a lot of states are starting to crack down and it's potentially becoming illegal. And so then we're talking as far as in the future, I suspect in the next 5 to 10 years, decent number of states are going to adopt those things. And so it's going to be tougher and tougher, or people are going to get in more and more trouble or going to get cracked down on when it comes to trying to do things at home or try and cut costs in that way. People performing ultrasounds at their house, it's the same thing. When they could miss a serious diagnosis, and because of that, because they want to use their pride to say, oh, I've done this plenty of times, but have no formal education on it, it bites them in the butt in the end. And so
very interesting. I mean, that's an amazing point, is the fact that we're going to continuously see restrictions come into play and regulations, because I think that a lot of people don't realize it, but the lack of regulation that allows people to have that free will and the freedom of choice that they're abusing in that sense, as far as doing things that are really either costing dogs lives or just not trying to go do this step by step the right way, is going to cause for, in my opinion, probably a lot more restrictions in general. So for you, in terms of some advancements you've seen regarding restrictions and laws and stuff of that sort coming into play, what have you seen abroad?
Oh, abroad?
Generally speaking, I don't know exactly what.
I thought you meant in Australia.
In the United States.
In the United States, okay. Yeah, so look, a lot of these laws are in place because of the bovine industry or cows.
Okay.
Because a lot of times we just don't have enough manpower to be able to AI cows. And so you'll have what's called an AI technician, which will often go around and help breed a bunch of cows to help that industry. And what that's done is because those laws are in place for that, it doesn't necessarily differentiate between species. And so that's allowed a lot of people to do, say, TCIs at home. Whereas I've also seen people where they'll shove a TCI scope through the bladder and cause a dog to have serious infection in the abdomen because of that. And so that stuff is going to really bite people in the butt just from a legality standpoint. But I just see more and more small animal veterinarians or small animal reproduction people are advocating for the dog's health and also just for the best care for the animal. And so I suspect, and I'm starting to see that stuff that where local governments or typically state governments will crack down on that stuff more and more. And we're also getting pressure. I mean, look, if you're not obvious to it now, like breeding is controversial across the United States. You know, it's always adopt, don't shop, not adopt and shop, which is usually what I say, because. Yeah, I mean, I sleep very well at night with what I do because I know what I'm trying to do is good for the country. And but yeah, state governments, like I suspect, you know, our local state government is starting to kind of go after, or not go after, but investigate some of the other clinics that are around there that don't necessarily have vets on the premises, right? Or people who are trying to do that stuff at home. When I worked in North Carolina, there's a ton of people in North Carolina that love to do stuff at home. And I just found a lot of, not necessarily issues with that, but I saw a lot of misbreedings or non-pregnancies. That's the biggest thing is that I find is when people cut corners and do things at home, there's so many more misbreedings because of it. And of course, the answer is always, if it's a stud owner, it's like, oh, don't worry, I'll give you a free breeding next time she comes in a heat. It's like, that's 6 months of my life I got to wait. That's 6 months of my business, then I'm no income. So people just don't realize from a business standpoint that each breeding, I think, matters when you're really trying to do the right thing. And, yeah, just cutting corners is going to really bite you in the butt, usually quickly, but always eventually. And, yeah.
That's a interesting thing about how impactful, because if you're breeding with intention, you're aiming to create something, not just for the betterment of your breed, but you have a vision that you're trying to fulfill. What do you think as far as the that kind of perspective where you have individuals who are breeding for a specific purpose, and then of course there's the individuals that have they want to breed for the sake of making it a legitimate business. What do you believe the ideal mindset should be for breeders to balance the two and, you know, take that to make it fruitful, if that makes sense, make it successful? I hope that question was clear.
I'm going to roll with it.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds like what you're asking is, I mean, that's what we're trying to do at Breedwise, is you need education when it comes to reproduction physiology or reproduction in general, whether it's pregnancy, whelping, helping puppies out. Like, all of that is going to be an integral part of your business. But also you need some business education as well. Like, you can't just go to Walmart, put a box of puppies on the side and say, these are great puppies. I spent a lot of money on health testing. These are great puppies. Like, that's not really how you run a business or a legitimate one. 100%. And so, yeah, I really think focusing on education, what we're trying to do as far as teach people how to take care of dogs, how to try and breed healthier and healthier dogs. From a vet perspective, you could ask most vets in the country, and I mean, one of their biggest things is I would just love to see a Frenchie that could breed, or that could breathe. That could breathe, you know? I mean, there's plenty of dogs or issues in each breed that, you know, vets would love to see just be totally eradicated. You know, I tell you all the time, just like, don't you want your best friend to live a little bit longer? Yeah. It's like, yeah. I do. And not just to live it a little bit longer, because I don't want them just hanging on for the last 3 years, but live a healthier, longer life, you know? Yeah. And I really think we can achieve that with better education, both from a reproductive aspect and a business aspect, because guess what? You could breed the best dogs in the world, but if you don't know how to market yourself, if you don't know how to run a business, you're going to fail. Yeah. And you're going to fail probably pretty quickly. You know? So
this industry has a way of chewing people up and spitting it out.
Sure
you
does.
Know, if you don't know what you're doing. So for you, you know, when it comes down to why you believe Breedwise exists, and more importantly, just bridging the gap between science, ethics, and scaling actual breeding businesses, How long have you felt like this was necessary, and what's your vision?
Man, it's crazy to me. Like, everybody loves to complain, and just general practitioners especially, they love to complain about breeders, but why hasn't anybody done anything about it? You know, if you're just going to keep complaining and do nothing about it except go volunteer at the shelter, which is good. I'm not advocating not to do that, but quit complaining and start teaching people how to do things better, you know? It drives me insane that, sure, we could talk about the issues here, the issues there, but somebody's got to step up and do it, right? And so we could complain about the breeding industry. It's the same reason you got into this, right? You hear so many of your buddies in the breeding world, and they're just like, what am I doing wrong? You know, I'm trying to do this stuff, or, you know, I've got supposedly good dogs. Maybe they don't, right? But, yeah, from a veterinary aspect, you know, I hear it endlessly from peers or general practitioners where they don't even want to talk to me necessarily, or I bring up breeding and everybody gets tense. I'm just like, why are you tense, you know? Or why are you complaining about this and not necessarily trying to help these people instead of just completely rejecting them? Because guess what? That's certainly not going to help the issue. That's going to push people further away from the veterinary industry and continue this vicious cycle of poor breedings, and less quality dogs.
It's interesting, right? Because when you think about the aspect of veterinarians not taking a part in the change they wish to see in the world,
Yeah.
they end up having to deal with the consequences
Of
regardless.
course, yeah.
They have to deal with that
Yeah.
regardless. So then it becomes like you said, a vicious cycle where they get entrenched in that feeling of dislike, but
Yeah.
there is no adjustment.
No.
You know?
No, it's not.
I think that's pretty interesting, right? Because when you think about it from that perspective and we say, hey, like, we have these veterinarians that could and should take a part in bettering this industry and being a support system for not just the breeder, because the breeder's the front end, but the actual back end is the owner.
Yeah.
You're actually helping the individuals buying
Yeah.
these dogs.
Yeah.
Now, to kind of double down on this question, when you think about the dynamic of adopt, don't shop, and the disdain for
Yeah.
breeders and stuff of that sort,
Sure.
what is the reality behind breeding going away as an activity and the impact on purebred dogs versus, you know, I guess you could call them mutts, right? Like dogs that have multiple breeds within them.
Yeah, so I guess just a couple of quick stats, but basically, like, if everybody were to stop breeding, we'd basically lose all dogs within about 15 years. So it's not going away anytime soon. Second thing is 95% of dogs in shelters are mixed breed dogs. So it's something to take into account of, like, are breeders the real issue when it comes to shelter animals? I always emphasize to every one of my clients, like, my goal in working with you is I don't want a single one of these animals to end up in the shelter. And often what people also don't realize is reproduction specialists, like, we're often the ones, or people who get into reproductive physiology, we're the ones who are going to help out the shelter issue. You know, there's massive efforts to try and create a vaccine to sterilize dogs instead of having to do a spay or a neuter surgery. You know, in other countries where there's massive stray dog problems, and that's causing disease issues, like in India, rabies it kills 50,000 people a year at least,
Really?
if not more than that, and it's usually from stray dogs.
Wow.
We could fix that issue part of it, by spaying and neutering part of these stray dogs to then decrease the stray population and help save actual human lives by doing that. So, and that's going to be reproductive physiologists essentially who are going to create that vaccine, or a safe vaccine, to be able to do that stuff. And so people want to fight us all the time, or the shelter world seems to want to fight us as breeders or breeding helpers. And, you know, we can be helpful if we can finally work together. Yeah, exactly. But
it's an interesting equation.
yeah, it's funny. So I think most reproductive specialists, especially, our goal is all the same. Like, we don't want to see any dogs in shelters. We don't. We'd love for them to be totally cleared out. I'd love to just get rid of shelters all across the country. That's my goal. My goal is also to get rid of veterinarians all across the country. What I want to do is to have dogs so healthy we never have to go to the vet ever. That's what I want. Get rid of the veterinary industry. We don't need it because we got just dogs that are super healthy, right?
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous statement, but
Yeah, I know the vets are watching this. Like, what are you trying to do here? What are you trying to do?
But yeah, I mean, so we talked about that vicious cycle where we're letting breeders we don't want to help them, and so they're continuously having this bad vicious cycle, right? Well, that's causing worse dogs to have to visit the vet more and more and more. So
Yes.
you want to talk about stop visiting the vet so much or cutting costs. Breed healthier dogs. We don't have to go to the vet as much,
Yeah.
right? Anyway, you get me on a roll now.
No, I love it. I love it, bro. So when it comes down to,
Sorry, I don't even think I answered your question.
It's all good. You answered a good question, whatever question came to mind.
Yeah.
Haha. But as far as predictions, right? What do you believe the future holds for the breeding
Yeah.
industry?
Yeah, it's a bright future. I think especially DNA and genetics is going to really take off in the next 10 to 20 years, and we're going to have so much information we don't even know what to do with it, especially when it comes to health. And that's when breeders really need to take an active role, which is why it's so important right now for us to take a role in educating breeders, because we want them to have a good foundation. We don't want to just be like, hey, here's a bunch of data, figure it out, right? We want to have an active community that is already in place trying to better these breeds. We want to get a head start on that stuff, because guess what? We still need good stock. Just because we have genetic information saying these are the right genes we need in place, well, guess what? We got none of those because we've been breeding such bad dogs for the past 50 years, you know? And so, yeah, the future is bright, especially in genetics, right? But also technology. When it comes to TCIs are probably 40 years old now, around there, and I think that's really helped a lot of people as far as genetic diversity. Frozen semen, which we've had around for, I guess in theory, almost 100 years now, something like that. I brought a dog not too recently with 40-year-old semen.
Is it 40?
40, yep. She ended up losing the pregnancy, but
Oh, wow.
we did technically get a pregnancy out of her, which is great. But yeah, so it's only going to get better, right? Which is the exciting part, because we can really take genes from all around the world and be able to cross those dogs basically to try and help with genetic diversity, help with just improving those lines, right, or improving dogs in general. And so I think with communications, technology, all of that's going to come together over these next 10 to 20 years, and we're really going to make big advancements in just bettering dogs.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited for it. Innovation over everything. There's a really good, it's a
Sorry
funny,
about that.
no, you're good, bro. There's a funny statement. So if you were to ask breeders, and let me get a guess. If you were to ask breeders if they knew what genetic diversity was, out of 10, how many would know?
Do you want me to answer? Or you want
You.
3, maybe?
3 would know what genetic diversity is.
Probably, or truly. Well,
Like truly have a good understanding.
Truly have a good understanding. 1 for
One.
sure. Yeah. I guess it depends on the breeds. I find
Yeah.
smaller breeds tend to be, because they know they're really trying to save a breed at this point, so they end up having to do a whole lot more research on that stuff. But I'd say if you just took the general breeding population, yeah, probably around 3 or so would really understand genetic diversity as a whole. But
And how crucial is that to improving a breed?
yeah, I mean, it's massive, right? So we can talk about inbreeding coefficient. So a lot of the working dogs I find tend to do more inbreeding, or line breeding as they call it, because they want to hyper focus on one specific quality in a dog. And in the short term, sure, it's probably a decent plan as far as getting exactly what you want, but over the long term, it's horrible, right? We know for a fact inbreeding coefficient, as it goes up, is going to decrease litter sizes. It's going to increase health issues in a breed. So it's just one of those, that is a bad long-term plan. Sure, we may get a quick short-term return on that investment, but it's not a great long-term plan, and we're decreasing our genetic pool. So when it comes to genetic variation as a long-term plan, guess what? If we find out that we bred this same dog in a line breeding, and then that dog has then gone and bred 50 litters, well, it turns out after, he was fine, but all of his litters since then have had this major health issue, and now that's permeated throughout the breed. And now we've got a real big issue on our hands where we can't really breed any of those dogs, so that takes away some of that genetic pool. Or maybe it's in some of the other breedings or breedings before him that now we really need to just totally avoid, right? So yeah, they've done some pretty big overhauls on some breeds where they've talked about bringing in other breeds to try and save a breed in particular. So yeah, it's
interesting to think about that,
Yeah.
right? Because when you look at breeds that need the diversification of genetics, but they don't. How do you accomplish that how do you bring another breed in without paper hanging in a registry? I don't know if that's your expertise.
What's paper hanging?
So paper hanging is basically where you have a dog that is let me put it like this. There's a breed. The breed may be, it's a really good question. Paper hanging is when you have a litter and one of the puppies that you say is from that litter is not from that litter, but you did that so that way you could still put it in your breeding program and have it registered, right? So when it comes down to genetic diversity, some people will do an outcross for their breeding program because they're like, hey, this may be necessary. Some people just do it for aesthetic. But then the question becomes, if there is a breed that has its back against the wall when it comes down to genetic diversity, what is the right way to go about doing that?
Yeah, so, I mean, another thing you talk about is competition, like just amongst breeders, right? Gatekeeping is a big thing you talk about. Well, how to save a breed is community. Like oftentimes a kennel club will have to come together and say, what do we do about this, right? So I think community is going to be a big portion of that, working collaboratively and not competitively as far as really trying to work as a group to save a breed or as a group to better the health of a breed. I think that's probably the biggest thing you can do. The more communal a kennel is or a kennel club is, the easier it is to say, hey, look, I've seen your lines before, I've seen you at shows, I've seen the health testing results or whatever, I really like to breed with your dog. And instead of being competitive, it's like, yeah, no, that sounds great, So I think collaboration is going to be a big part of that. Being able to have a community that's helpful rather than hurtful is going to be a massive part of that. And then as well as understanding genetics and the growth we'll make with genetics and DNA testing over the next few years is really going to help out with that stuff too.
No, it's going to be really cool. What are you most excited about when it comes to Breedwise?
Making an impact,
Changing the world.
Changing the world, for sure. I've said it a few times, but I want my best friend to live a little bit longer and a little bit healthier. And I feel like this is sort of a ground roots project of doing that instead of trying to we're working with vets to try and advocate and help these breeders, but we're going straight to the source as far as people who are producing these dogs and saying, look, you guys have to do this. I can't breed every dog out there, and match make and do all these things, but I need you guys to be educated so that we can do this as a group. And I think that's Breedwise's mission, is essentially to help people be successful, but also really try and help dogs in general.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in creating Breedwise, it's literally about advancing not just the industry, but these breeds, you know, because right now we're pretty much at a standstill, I'd say.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Dr. David, has been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. I'm excited to do more content, bro.
Me too, man.
First podcast, he's a legend. Can you tell?
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.